Serial killer Ian Brady was a troubled child and served prison time as a teenager for burglary and petty crime. As an adult, he murdered multiple children in partnership with his girlfriend, Myra Hindley. Both were arrested and convicted in the 1960s. Ian Brady was born in a Glasgow, Scotland slum on January 2, 1938, to a single mother, Peggy Stewart. He never knew his father's identity. Unable to afford a babysitter and work as a waitress to support them, she was forced to leave Ian alone for long periods. She gave him up for unofficial adoption when he was 4 months old, visiting him fairly regularly until he was 12. However, she never told him that she was his mother. Brady was a lonely, challenging child, despite his adoptive parents' best attempts, prone to temper tantrums and slow to integrate with his peers. He developed a fascination with the Nazis and the writings of Nietzsche, and began a career in petty crime and burglary, which resulted in his return, aged 16, to live with his mother and stepfather Patrick Brady to avoid a custodial sentence. He tried to bolster a sense of belonging in his new family by taking his stepfather's name. Still, he found genuine excitement through his continued interest in the Third Reich, as well as in the writings of the Marquis de Sade and other sadistic authors. He returned to crime within a short time and, as a result, ended up in Strangeways prison at the age of 17, where he was forced to toughen up considerably while also learning rudimentary bookkeeping skills. Following his release in November 1957, he became even more of a loner, employed at different manual jobs for short periods, until he took a job as a stock clerk with a Manchester firm. It was here that he met Hindley when she was employed as a secretary in 1961. Hindley was irresistibly drawn to Brady, seeing romance and intelligence in his aloofness. She wrote of her intense feelings for him in her diary constantly for over a year before he finally showed some interest in her. He eventually asked her out. He quickly indoctrinated her in his extreme political views, taking her to see the film, The Nuremberg Trials, on their first date and encouraging her to read works by Adolf Hitler and de Sade. Brady was her first lover. She was soon entirely under his control, dressing and styling herself to please him, accepting his extreme political views, and even posing for pornographic pictures. Encouraged by her unquestioning acceptance, Brady's ideas became even more outrageous, culminating in his instruction to her that murder and rape were the supreme pleasure. Family and friends noticed the cumulative effect that Brady had on her, and she became increasingly moody and secretive. Brady tested her blind allegiance by pretending to plan a robbery, and was gratified when she took all the steps necessary to execute the plan, without question. Brady recognized that he had found the soulmate who would assist him in making his perverted ideas, of pain and pleasure, a reality. On the night of July 12, 1963, 16-year-old Pauline Reed became their first victim. She was kidnapped by Hindley while on her way to a local dance, then driven up to where Brady was awaiting their arrival. Reed was raped, beaten, and stabbed before being buried. 4 months later, on November 23, 1963, 12-year-old John Kilbride disappeared from the vicinity of the market in Ashton-under-Lyne, never to be seen again. On June 16, 1964, 12-year-old Keith Bennett disappeared while at his grandmother's house. His disappearance was not noted until the next day, and a massive police search revealed no clues. Hindley had lured him into her car, with a request for assistance in loading some boxes, then rendezvoused with Brady on Saddleworth Moor, where Keith was taken, by Brady, to a gully next to a stream, then raped, strangled, and buried there. On the afternoon of the Boxing Day holiday, 1964, 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey disappeared from a local fairground. Again, a vast police effort, bolstered by volunteers, unearthed no clues as to her whereabouts. October 7, 1965, proved the police's turning point, when Hindley's 17-year-old brother-in-law, David Smith, arrived at Hyde Police Station with a horrific tale of violence. Knowing Brady through the family connection, Smith was initially attracted by Brady's unorthodox and violent politics, but this changed when he arrived at Hindley and Brady's home, on the evening of October 6, to witness Brady killing 17-year-old Edward Evans with an axe. After Evans was finally throttled with a length of electrical flex, Hindley and Brady joked about the mess, and also told Smith of other victims buried on the moors. Concealing his horror for fear of meeting a similar fate, Smith assisted them with the cleanup before returning home to tell his wife and alert the police. Convinced by Smith's tale, police and reinforcements arrived at Brady's home, found the body of Evans in an upstairs bedroom, and arrested Brady immediately. Brady claimed that there had been an argument between himself, Evans, and Smith that had got out of hand, denying that Hindley had anything to do with the murder. She remained at liberty until 4 days later, when police found a document in her car describing in detail how she and Brady had planned to carry out the murder. The investigation would probably have gone no further than the death of Evans, if Smith had not mentioned Brady's claim that other bodies were buried on Saddleworth Moor. Already familiar with the various unexplained disappearances, police were able to pinpoint the area favored by Brady and Hindley, and began digging for the bodies of the children who had gone missing in the region over the previous 2 years. Leslie Ann Downey's naked body was found on October 10, 1965, followed 11 days later by the body of John Kilbride. Despite discovering the 2 bodies, the police had only circumstantial evidence against the pair. Fortunately, a more thorough search of their home led to the discovery of a left luggage ticket, which led in turn to a locker at Manchester Central Station. There, police found sadistic gadgets and pornography, including photographs of Leslie Ann, bound and gagged in Hindley's bedroom. A tape recording was also found, on which the little girl could be heard crying and begging for her life, as well as the voices of Brady and Hindley. Her mother, Ann Downey, was forced to identify the voice on the tape as that of her daughter even with the mounting evidence against them. Brady and Hindley denied murdering Leslie Ann, trying again to implicate David Smith. They claimed that Leslie Ann had left their home unharmed and that Smith must have murdered her later. Victims: John Kilbride. In the early evening of November 23, 1963, at a market in Ashton-under-Lyne, Brady and Hindley offered 12-year-old John Kilbride a lift home, saying his parents might worry that he was out so late. They also promised him a bottle of sherry. Once Kilbride was inside Hindley's hired Ford Anglia car, Brady said they would have to make a detour to their home for the sherry. En route, he suggested another detour, this time to search for a glove Hindley had lost on the moor. When they reached the moor, Brady took Kilbride with him while Hindley waited in the car. Brady sexually assaulted Kilbride and tried to slit his throat with a 6-inch serrated blade before strangling him with a shoelace or string. Keith Bennett. Early in the evening of June 16, 1964, Hindley asked 12-year-old Keith Bennett, who was on his way to his grandmother's house in Longsight, to load some boxes into her mini pickup, after which she said she would drive him home. Brady was in the back of the van. Hindley drove to a lay-by on Saddleworth Moor, and Brady went off with Bennett, supposedly looking for a lost glove. After about 30 minutes, Brady returned alone, carrying a spade that he had hidden there earlier. In response to Hindley's questions, he said that he had sexually assaulted Bennett and strangled him with a piece of string. Leslie Ann Downey. Brady and Hindley visited a fun fair in Ancoats on December 26, 1964, and noticed that 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey was alone. They approached her and deliberately dropped some shopping they were carrying, then asked her help in taking the packages to their car and then to Wardle Brook Avenue. At the house, Downey was undressed, gagged, and forced to pose for photographs before being raped and killed, perhaps strangled with a piece of string. Hindley later maintained that she went to fill a bath for Downey and found her dead when she returned. Brady claimed that Hindley killed Downey. The following morning Brady and Hindley drove Downey's body to Saddleworth Moor and buried her, naked with her clothes at her feet, in a shallow grave. Edward Evans. On the evening of October 6, 1965, Hindley drove Brady to Manchester Central Railway Station, where she waited outside in the car while he selected a victim. After a few minutes, Brady reappeared in the company of 17-year-old Edward Evans, an apprentice engineer who lived in Ardwick, to whom he introduced Hindley as his sister. Brady later claimed that he had picked up Evans for a sexual encounter. They drove to Brady and Hindley's home at Wardlebrook Avenue, where they relaxed over a bottle of wine. At some point, Brady sent Hindley to fetch Smith, her brother-in-law. Hindley's family had not approved of Maureen's marriage to Smith, who had several criminal convictions, including actual bodily harm and housebreaking, the first of which, wounding with intent, occurred when he was 11. Throughout the previous year, Brady had been cultivating a friendship with Smith, who had become in awe of Brady, something that increasingly worried Hindley as she felt it compromised their safety. Hindley returned with Smith and told him to wait outside for her signal, a flashing light. When the signal came, Smith knocked on the door and was met by Brady, who asked if he had come for the miniature wine bottles, and left him in the kitchen saying that he would collect the wine. Smith later told the police, "I waited about a minute or two, then suddenly I heard a hell of a scream. It sounded like a woman, really high-pitched. Then the screams carried on, one after another loud. Then I heard Myra shout, 'Dave, help him,' very loud. When I ran in, I just stood inside the living room, and I saw a young lad. He was lying with his head and shoulders on the couch, and his legs were on the floor. He was facing upwards. Ian was standing over him, facing him, with his legs on either side of the young lad's legs. The lad was still screaming. Ian had a hatchet in his hand, he was holding it above his head, and hit the lad on the left side of his head with the hatchet. I heard the blow, and it was a terrible hard blow. It sounded horrible." Smith then watched Brady throttle Evans with a length of electrical cord. Brady sprained his ankle in the struggle, and Evans' body was too heavy for Smith to carry to the car on his own, so they wrapped it in plastic sheeting and put it in the spare bedroom. The evidence linking Brady and Hindley with John Kilbride's murder was not as strong, but proved sufficient to charge them, with the result that they were charged with the murders of Edward Evans, Leslie Ann Downey and John Kilbride. Despite exhaustive searches, the bodies of the other two victims could not be found, and no charges were brought. Hindley and Brady were brought to trial at Chester Assizes on April 27, 1966, where they pleaded not guilty to all charges. Media interest was intense, and the pair's failure to show any remorse served to make public revulsion even greater. On May 6, 1966, Brady was found guilty of the murders of Leslie Ann Downey, John Kilbride, and Edward Evans, while Hindley was found guilty of the murders of Leslie Ann Downey and Edward Evans, and also for harboring Brady, in the knowledge that he had killed John Kilbride. They were both jailed for life, with a minimum recommended sentence of 30 years for what are today known as the Moores murders. Ian Brady went on a hunger strike at the high-security Ashworth Psychiatric Hospital in October 1999, demanding the legal right to starve himself to death, rather than serving the remainder of his life in prison. This demand was refused by the High Court in March 2000, which upheld the hospital's right to force-feed him. In August 2001, Brady was front-page news once again, when it was revealed that he stood to earn £12,000 for The Gates of Janus, a book he had written about serial killers. Though it made no mention of Brady's crimes, its publication was condemned by many, including the families of Brady's victims. Brady has also, apparently, written his autobiography, which is held by his lawyers, pending publication after his death. In February 2006, Brady sent the mother of victim Keith Bennett a letter. In the letter he complained of his treatment at the high-security hospital, saying he was being kept alive by force-feeding for political purposes. Brady also claimed that he could take police to within 20 yards of where Keith Bennett is buried. Staff at the hospital believe Brady was able to send the letter via a third party. Brady died on May 15, 2017. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe if you haven't.